Welcome to a quiet journey through the world of mosses, those small, ancient plants that carpet our forests, cling to rocks, and transform ordinary landscapes into something magical. Tonight, we'll explore the Pacific Northwest, one of the most remarkable places on Earth for these humble yet fascinating organisms. Let's begin in the coastal regions of North America, where something extraordinary is happening on a scale that surprises even botanists who dedicate their lives to studying these plants. The Pacific Northwest is one of North America's richest regions for moss diversity. We're talking about the coastal belt of British Columbia and the adjacent U.S. states. Washington, Oregon, parts of Idaho and Montana. This region, with its particular combination of climate and geography, has become a sanctuary for mosses. More species thrive here than in almost any comparable area on the continent. Walk through a forest in this region, and you're walking through what amounts to a moss museum, hundreds of species, often growing side by side, each adapted to slightly different conditions, each playing its role in the ecosystem. The sheer numbers are remarkable when you consider them. Coastal British Columbia alone supports roughly 600 moss species. 600 distinct kinds of moss, each with its own characteristics, its own preferences, its own story of evolution and adaptation. That's more than almost any other region on the entire continent. To put this in perspective, entire states elsewhere might have 100 or 200 species. But here, in this narrow coastal belt, the diversity is extraordinary. Scientists and naturalists have been documenting this diversity for generations, and the work continues today with modern technology making it easier than ever for people to contribute to our knowledge. There's an iNaturalist project devoted specifically to the bryophytes of the Pacific Northwest, bryophytes being the scientific name for the group that includes mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. This citizen science project includes records for about 750 species. Think about that, 750 different kinds. Some are well known, described by botanists long ago and appearing in every field guide. Others are ongoing discoveries, species that might be new to science, or perhaps just newly recognized as distinct from species they resemble. For those who want to learn these mosses, to put names to what they see in the forest, resources exist. A photographic field guide to Northwest North America mosses, liverworts, and lichens has been published, treating over 370 bryophyte species as representative of the broader region from Alaska down to southern Oregon. 370 species, and even that comprehensive guide can't include everything. It's a selection, chosen to represent the most common and distinctive species, the ones you're most likely to encounter. But even limiting the selection this way, it takes hundreds of pages to do justice to the region's diversity. This diversity isn't random. It spans multiple major orders, that's the level of classification above family, a grouping of related lineages that share fundamental characteristics. There's polytrichales, the haircap mosses, which often grow upright and relatively tall for mosses. There's Briales, a diverse order containing many of the mosses you might see in gardens or on soil. There's Hypnales, an enormous order of mostly creeping, branching mosses that drape over logs and rocks. And there's Sphagnales, the peat mosses, specialists of bogs and wetlands. Each order represents a different fundamental strategy for being a moss, a different evolutionary pathway that has worked successfully for millions of years. But why is the Pacific Northwest so rich in mosses? The answer lies in climate and geography, in the quiet patterns that shape where plants can and cannot thrive. West of the Cascade Mountains, something special happens. The Cascades run north to south, forming a barrier that shapes the entire climate of the region. West of this barrier, the combination of high rainfall and mild temperatures creates nearly perfect conditions for mosses. Rain comes in from the Pacific Ocean, moisture-laden clouds that release their water as they encounter the mountains. The rain falls gently and frequently, not in violent storms so much as in steady, persistent precipitation. And the temperatures stay mild. Not too hot in summer, not too cold in winter. This combination, abundant moisture and moderate temperatures, allows thick moss carpets to form. On soil, on logs, on tree trunks, on rocks, wherever there's a surface that stays moist, mosses can colonize it and thrive. Walk through a western Cascade forest, and you're walking through a green world where moss seems to cover everything. But travel east, over the mountains and into the interior plateaus, and the picture changes dramatically. Here, the moss communities shift toward more drought-tolerant species adapted to summer moisture stress. The Cascades have drawn most of the moisture from those Pacific clouds. East of the mountains, rainfall drops significantly. Summers become drier, hotter. The mosses that thrive here are different, tougher, more able to survive periods of desiccation. When the rains stop and the summer sun beats down, these mosses can curl up, shut down their metabolism, wait out the dry period. Then when autumn rains return, they revive and resume growing as if nothing had happened. It's a different strategy for survival, suited to a different climate. Many Pacific Northwest moss species show wide ranges that extend well beyond the region itself. They extend north into Alaska, where the days grow long in summer and darkness dominates winter. They extend south into at least northern California, where the climate begins to transition toward the drier conditions of the Mediterranean zone. The same species, growing across thousands of miles, from rainforests to tundra edges. This wide distribution speaks to the adaptability of these mosses, their ability to thrive across a range of conditions as long as certain basic requirements are met. Some species are even more widespread. Consider Hylocomium splendens, for instance, a moss we'll encounter again in our journey tonight. This species is circumboreal, meaning it occurs right around the northern parts of our planet. Across northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. Across Asia, Siberia, northern China, Japan. Across North America, Alaska, Canada, and down into the northern United States. The same species, everywhere. Found in forests half a world apart. You could look at Hylocomium splendens in a forest in Washington, then travel to a forest in Norway, and find the same species growing in much the same way. It's a reminder of how interconnected the northern forests are, how they share a common character despite being separated by oceans. But the Pacific Northwest flora isn't just about widespread species. It also includes something special, endemics or near endemics, species found nowhere else or almost nowhere else. Their very names often reference the region. Oregon beaked moss, for instance, a name that tells you immediately where this moss belongs, what corner of the world it calls home. These endemics are the specialists, the species that have evolved in this particular place and haven't spread elsewhere. Perhaps they're adapted to very specific conditions that only occur here. Perhaps they simply haven't had the opportunity to disperse farther. Whatever the reason, they're unique to the Pacific Northwest, a reminder that this region doesn't just have more species, it has species found nowhere else on Earth. As you drift towards sleep, picture this landscape of moss diversity. Hundreds of species, from the coastal rainforests to the dry interior plateaus, from Alaska to California. Each species with its own story, its own place in the ecosystem. The work of documenting and understanding this diversity continues, with botanists and citizen scientists adding to our knowledge year by year. But even now, even with all we've learned, the complete moss list of the Pacific Northwest remains something of a moving target. There's always more to discover, more to understand, in this green world beneath our feet. Rest now, and let these images settle into your thoughts. Thick carpets of moss in rain-soaked forests, tough drought-resistant species clinging to dry rocks, the same species appearing in forests half a world apart, each moss quietly going about its work of growth and survival. Let's talk about the different ways that mosses grow, the forms they take, the strategies they employ to make their way in the world. If you look at mosses carefully, you'll notice they don't all grow the same way. Some creep and spread horizontally across surfaces. Others grow upright in tight bunches. Some form soft cushions. Others create hanging curtains. These different growth forms aren't random. They reflect fundamental differences in how these mosses live and reproduce. Many Pacific Northwest mosses are what botanists call Pleurocarpous. It's a technical term, but it describes something simple. These are the mosses that creep and branch across surfaces. In the humid forests west of the Cascades, where moisture hangs in the air and logs stay perpetually damp, Pleurocarpous mosses dominate. They send out stems that grow horizontally, branching and rebranching, creating intricate networks across bark, rock, and soil. Picture a moss that looks less like individual plants and more like a green mat. That's typically Pleurocarpous. These mosses produce their spore capsules on small side branches rather than at the tips of main stems. This allows them to keep expanding their creeping network while still reproducing. It's an efficient design for covering ground, or covering logs and tree trunks, as the case may be. Then there are the Acrocarpous mosses, which grow in a completely different way. These ones grow upright, in tufts. Instead of creeping horizontally, they send their stems vertically upward, often growing close together in dense clusters. Their spore capsules form at the tips of these upright stems. If you see a moss that looks like a miniature forest, with individual stems standing up like tiny trees, you're probably looking at an Acrocarpous moss. And interestingly, these upright mosses become more common in drier habitats, rocky outcrops where water drains away quickly, open soil exposed to sun and wind. The upright growth form seems to offer some advantage in these harsher conditions. Perhaps it helps them capture moisture from fog or dew. Perhaps it reduces water loss compared to spreading horizontally. Whatever the mechanism, Acrocarpous mosses thrive where their Pleurocarpous cousins struggle. Now, among the Acrocarpous mosses, one group deserves special attention. The sphagnum mosses, the peat formers, occupy specialized acidic wetlands and bogs scattered throughout the region. If you've ever walked through a bog and felt the ground give softly beneath your feet, felt that spongy, waterlogged sensation, you've experienced sphagnum. These mosses don't just grow in bogs. In many ways, they create the bog environment. They're incredibly good at holding water, absorbing it into specialized cells in their leaves. A sphagnum moss can hold water equivalent to many times its own dry weight. And as they grow, adding new growth at the top while the older parts below die but don't fully decompose, they build peat. Layer upon layer, year after year, century after century. Some peatlands in the Pacific Northwest contain peat deposits several meters thick, representing thousands of years of accumulated sphagnum growth. The old-growth conifer forests of the coastal Pacific Northwest are global hotspots for large, canopy-dwelling mosses. This is something special, something that makes this region stand out even among other temperate rainforests. High up in the canopy of ancient Douglas firs and western red cedas, where fog drifts through the branches and moisture condenses on needles and bark, mosses grow in astonishing abundance. Not just a thin coating, but thick mats, several inches deep in some cases. These epiphytic mosses, epiphytic meaning they grow on other plants, create what amounts to aerial gardens. They provide habitat for invertebrates, hold tremendous amounts of water, intercept nutrients from rain and fog. A single old-growth tree might support dozens of moss species, hundreds of pounds of moss biomass. This phenomenon reaches its peak in the Pacific Northwest. Yes, other regions have epiphytic mosses. But the combination of old-growth forest structure, mild climate, and high rainfall in the Pacific Northwest creates conditions that few places can match. Here's something that might surprise you. Many of what we consider common mosses actually hide cryptic diversity. Cryptic diversity, that's when what looks like one species is actually several species that are difficult or impossible to tell apart without detailed study. You might look at a moss and identify it confidently based on field guides and visible characteristics. But if you took samples to a laboratory and analyzed their DNA, you might discover that what you thought was one widespread species is actually 3 or 4 distinct species, each with slightly different genetic makeup, each perhaps adapted to slightly different conditions. Modern taxonomy is still resolving these mysteries. Scientists are using DNA analysis to untangle relationships that were impossible to sort out using only microscopes and visible characteristics. The common moss you see on a log might be rarer than you think, or there might be several species all mixed together, all looking almost identical, all quietly distinct at the genetic level. It's a reminder that there's still so much to learn, that even in well-studied regions like the Pacific Northwest, mosses hold secrets yet to be revealed. As you drift towards sleep, picture these different growth forms. The creeping, branching networks of Pleurocarpous mosses spreading across logs. The upright tufts of Acrocarpous mosses standing firm on dry rocks. The soft, waterlogged cushions of sphagnum building peat in quiet bogs. The thick mats of epiphytic mosses high in old-growth canopies, creating hanging gardens in the sky. Each form represents a different solution to the challenges of being a moss, a different strategy for survival and reproduction. And beneath the visible differences, there's hidden diversity still being discovered, species that look the same but carry distinct genetic heritage. The world of mosses is richer and more complex than it first appears. You just have to look closely to see it. Let's walk slowly through the forest floor now, in your mind's eye. See the carpet of needles, the fallen branches, the slowly rotting logs. And covering much of it, the mosses. One moss you're likely to encounter in these forests is stair-step moss, scientifically known as Hylocomium splendens. Yes, the same circumboreal species we mentioned earlier. This moss produces something quite remarkable along its stems, annual segments. Each year, the moss grows upward and outward, adding a new segment. These segments create a tiered appearance, like little stairs climbing up the stem. It's a distinctive pattern, one that makes Hylocomium splendens relatively easy to identify even without a microscope. You can actually see the tiers with your naked eye if you look carefully. Each tier represents 1 year of growth, one season's addition to the moss colony. And here's something wonderful about these annual segments: they can be used to estimate the age of a moss colony. Count the tiers, and you're counting years. It's similar to counting tree rings, but visible on the surface rather than hidden inside. A moss colony with 7 tiers is probably about 7 years old. A colony with 15 tiers has been growing for approximately 15 years. Some colonies are quite old, slowly adding tier upon tier, year after year, marking time in the forest in the quietest way imaginable. It's a form of growth found in only a few moss species, and Hylocomium splendens is one of the most prominent examples. This stair-step moss often dominates the forest floor in moist coniferous forests west of the Cascades. Walk through certain forests, and everywhere you step, Hylocomium splendens is beneath your feet. It forms such extensive carpets that it defines the visual character of the understory. That particular shade of green, that tiered texture, it's what gives these forests their distinctive appearance. The moss is so abundant that it influences the entire ecosystem. It holds moisture in the forest floor, provides habitat for invertebrates, effects which other plants can establish themselves. A dominant species in every sense. Like many widespread species, Hylocomium splendens has accumulated several historical synonyms, different scientific names given at different times by different botanists. When a species has very wide distribution and variable form, this often happens. A botanist in Norway might describe it and give it one name. A botanist in Alaska might describe what seems to be a different species and give it another name. Later, when specimens are compared more carefully, scientists realize they're all the same species. The older names become synonyms, still encountered in older literature, sometimes causing confusion, but no longer considered valid. The current accepted name, Hylocomium splendens, has priority and stability, but you might still see references to the old synonyms in books published decades ago. Another moss you'll find on forest floors is gooseneck moss, Rytidiodelphis laureus. This moss forms lush, arching mats that can visually dominate wet coastal forests. The common name comes from its appearance. The stems arch upward and then curve back down, resembling the neck of a goose. It's an apt description. These arching mats can be quite beautiful, creating waves of green across the forest floor. In the right conditions, Rhytidiadelphis laureus grows so abundantly that it transforms the ground into something that looks almost sculpted, all those arching stems creating a three-dimensional texture. Those arching shoots serve a function beyond aesthetics. They create small, moist microhabitats underneath the curves. The space beneath an arching moss stem stays damper than the surrounding environment, protected from direct airflow, maintaining higher humidity. Invertebrates shelter in these tiny spaces. Small beetles, springtails, mites, all sorts of tiny creatures find refuge under the arching moss. The moss provides habitat not through its biochemistry but through its architecture, through the physical structure it creates as it grows. And in doing so, it supports a whole community of small organisms that might otherwise struggle to survive in the forest. Several Rhytidiadelphis species occur in the Pacific Northwest, and they differ subtly in shape and habitat preference. One species might prefer slightly wetter conditions, another slightly drier. One might arch more dramatically, another grow more prostrate. The differences can be subtle, requiring careful observation and sometimes microscopic examination of leaf details. But each species has carved out its own niche in the ecosystem, found its own particular set of conditions where it thrives. They coexist in the forest, sometimes growing near each other, each responding to the subtle gradients of moisture and light and nutrients that create different microhabitats within what looks to our eyes like uniform forest floor. Oregon beaked moss, Kimbergia oregana, is a common forest floor species in western Oregon and Washington. You'll find it frequently if you search carefully, growing among the needles, spreading across rotting wood, creating small patches of distinctive green. Common doesn't mean unimportant, though. These common species often play crucial roles in the ecosystem precisely because they're abundant. They hold moisture, they provide habitat, they contribute to nutrient cycling. Oregon beaked moss is one of those reliable presences, part of the characteristic assemblage of species that defines Pacific Northwest forest floors. This moss appears under different names in older floras, older field guides and botanical manuals. The classification has changed over the years as botanists have revised their understanding of how different mosses are related to each other. What was once placed in one genus might be moved to another as genetic and microscopic studies reveal new relationships. The moss itself hasn't changed, it's been growing the same way in the same forests for thousands of years. Only our names for it and our understanding of its relationships have evolved. It's a reminder that scientific classification is always a work in progress, always being refined as new information becomes available. Badge moss, Hylocomium insignia, grows on moist soil and decaying wood. If you kneel down and look closely at a rotting log or a shaded patch of soil, you might see this moss. Its leaves are relatively broad for a moss, wider than those of many species, spreading out to catch the limited light that filters through to the forest floor. The broad leaves give it a distinctive appearance, almost like a tiny leafy plant rather than the narrow-leaved mosses we often think of. Badge moss has adapted to relatively shaded conditions, those dim understory environments where light is precious and must be captured efficiently. And as you settle deeper into rest, let these forest floor images drift through your mind. The tiered stems of stair-step moss marking years of quiet growth. The arching mats of gooseneck moss creating shelter for tiny creatures. The common but essential Oregon-beaked moss spreading through the understory. The broad-leaved badge moss capturing dim light on rotting logs. Each species going about its work, growing slowly, creating habitat, participating in the great cycles of the forest. The forest floor, a world within a world, rich with quiet life. Let's continue our journey across the forest floor, paying particular attention now to the fallen logs and the mosses that make these decaying giants their home. Badge moss, that broad-leaved species we just encountered, is often among the first mosses to colonize rotting nurse logs. When a tree falls in the forest, and eventually all trees do fall, it begins a long process of decay. At first, the bark is intact and the wood beneath is hard. But gradually, weather and fungi and insects begin to break down the log. The bark loosens and falls away. The wood softens. And as it does, mosses arrive. Badge moss is often one of the pioneers, establishing itself early in the succession. It's well adapted to the conditions on these logs, the moisture retained by the rotting wood, the shade provided by surrounding vegetation, the nutrients released as the wood decays. Once established, the moss itself helps transform the log, holding moisture, trapping debris, creating conditions for other plants to follow. These nurse logs, as they're called, support entire communities of plants and animals, and mosses like badge moss are among the first to recognize the opportunity they represent. Menzies Neckera menziesii, forms flattened, glossy mats on trunks and rocks. You'll find this moss pressing close to bark or stone surfaces, its stems aligned with the substrate rather than sticking out. The glossiness is distinctive, the leaves have a slight sheen that catches what little light penetrates the forest canopy. It's an attractive moss, elegant in its simplicity. The flattened form gives it a two-dimensional quality, almost like moss pressed in a book, though of course it's very much alive. The way Menzies Neckera aligns closely with surfaces isn't random, it's adaptation. By lying flat against the substrate, the moss maximizes its exposure to light. In the dim understory of a Pacific Northwest forest, light is limited. Direct sunlight rarely reaches the forest floor. Instead, there's diffuse light, scattered light, the kind that filters through layers of leaves and needles. For a moss growing on a tree trunk or rock, lying flat helps capture more of this precious resource. The leaves spread out in a single layer, each positioned to receive light without being shaded by others. It's an efficient design for life in low-light conditions. Some Neckera species are sensitive to air pollution, and this sensitivity makes them useful as bioindicators. A bioindicator is an organism whose presence, absence, or health tells you something about environmental conditions. Where air quality is good, in pristine forests far from pollution sources, Neckera mosses thrive. You'll find abundant colonies, healthy and reproducing. But as pollution increases, sulfur dioxide from industry, nitrogen oxides from vehicles, other airborne pollutants. Neck area begins to struggle. The mosses become less abundant, less vigorous. Eventually, if pollution reaches high enough levels, neck area disappears entirely from an area. Scientists can survey neck area populations and use them to assess air quality. The moss becomes a living detector, quietly indicating whether the air is clean or contaminated. It's one of many ways that mosses serve as indicators of environmental health. Cattail moss, Isothecium stoloniferum, drapes from branches and logs like green curtains. This is one of the hanging mosses, the ones that create that magical appearance in Pacific Northwest forests where mosses seem to be everywhere, even hanging from the air itself. The stems of cattail moss can be several inches long, hanging down like tassels or like the tail of a cat, hence the common name. When you walk through a forest where cattail moss is abundant, you might have to brush past these hanging curtains, feeling the soft moss against your face or hands. These hanging mats of cattail moss intercept fog as it rolls through the forest. The Pacific Northwest coast is famous for its fog, those thick banks of mist that form over the ocean and drift inland, especially during summer mornings. As fog passes through the forest canopy, it encounters obstacles, branches, needles, and moss. Water condenses on these surfaces, forming tiny droplets. The moss, with its fine structure and large surface area, is particularly good at capturing fog moisture. The droplets accumulate, grow heavier, and eventually begin to drip. The moss channels this water downward, drop by drop, until it reaches the ground below. In this way, cattail moss and other epiphytic mosses capture water directly from the air and deliver it to the forest floor. During dry summers, when rain might not fall for weeks, fog drip can be a significant source of moisture for the forest ecosystem. Nuttall's yellow moss, Homolothecium natalii, forms yellow-green wefts on bark and rock. This moss stands out because of its color, not the deep green or dark green of many forest mosses, but a brighter, yellow-tinged green. The difference is noticeable even to casual observers. The texture is distinctive too, not as fine and feathery as some mosses, but coarser, forming tangled mats or wefts. You might run your fingers across it and feel how it differs from the softer, more delicate mosses nearby. The color and texture of Nuttall's yellow moss help distinguish it from darker forest mosses, even without close examination. When you're trying to learn mosses in the field, these visual cues matter enormously. Not everyone has the time or inclination to collect samples and examine them under a microscope. Being able to recognize distinctive species by their overall appearance, their color, texture, growth form, habitat, makes moss identification accessible to more people. Nuttall's yellow moss is one of those species that beginners can learn to recognize relatively quickly, and that recognition provides a foothold for learning more subtle distinctions. Many forest mosses can be identified with a hand lens. A simple magnifying glass, perhaps 10x or 20x magnification, is often sufficient. With a hand lens, you can see details invisible to the naked eye, the precise shape of leaves, how they attach to the stem, whether they're toothed or smooth along the edges, whether they have specialized cells at their base. You can see the overall pattern of branching, the arrangement of leaves around the stem. These details, visible with just a hand lens, allow you to identify quite a few species with reasonable confidence. For enthusiasts who want to learn mosses but don't have access to a microscope, a good hand lens and a field guide can open up the world of moss identification. But others require microscopic examination for certainty. Some features are just too small, too subtle, to see even with a hand lens. The detailed structure of leaf cells, whether they're elongate or rounded, smooth or papillose, thick-walled or thin-walled. The characteristics of the spore capsule, the structure of the peristome teeth that help disperse spores, the presence or absence of specialized structures. For species that differ in these microscopic details, you need to collect a sample, take it home or to a laboratory, and examine it carefully under a compound microscope. Moss identification can become quite technical, requiring patience and attention to tiny details. But for those who enjoy this kind of meticulous work, it's endlessly rewarding. Each identification is a puzzle solved, a mystery revealed. As you drift towards sleep, picture these mosses in their forest home. Badge moss pioneering on nurse logs, beginning the transformation from fallen tree to fertile substrate. Menzies neckera pressed flat against bark, maximizing its capture of scarce light. Cattail moss hanging in green curtains, channeling fog water to the forest below. Nuttall's yellow moss standing out with its distinctive color. Some easily identified with just careful observation, others requiring microscopic study. Each contributing to the rich tapestry of the forest floor, each playing its quiet role in the ecosystem. Let these images settle gently in your mind as sleep approaches. Let's leave the dim, moist forest floor now and move into more open areas. Places where sunlight reaches the ground. Where rocks stand exposed. Where conditions are harsher and the mosses must be correspondingly tougher. For naturalists learning to identify mosses in these open habitats, field-oriented keys emphasize visible traits to help with identification. These identification guides are designed with practicality in mind. Not everyone who wants to learn mosses is a professional botanist with access to laboratory equipment. Many are amateur naturalists, hikers who have become curious about the green organisms they see on their walks, gardeners who want to know what's growing on their rocks and soil. Field-oriented keys recognize this reality. They guide you through identification using traits you can see: overall color, size, habitat preference, growth form. Does it grow in tufts or mats? Is it yellowish green or dark green? Does it prefer wet or dry sites? These visible characteristics can narrow down the possibilities considerably, often enough to reach a confident identification, or at least to get close enough that you know what group of mosses you're looking at. Common haircap moss, Pleurocarpous, forms tall tufts on moist soils. Tall is a relative term when talking about mosses, of course. We're not talking about plants measured in feet. But Pleurocarpous can reach several inches in height, which makes it a giant among mosses. The individual stems stand upright, often growing so close together that they support each other, creating thick tufts that look almost like miniature forests. The name haircap comes from the cap that covers the spore capsule, a hairy, hood-like structure that protects the developing spores. When you see a haircap moss with capsules, the caps are quite distinctive, golden brown and fuzzy, perched atop the tall stems like little hats. The leaves of common haircap moss contain something special, lamellae. These are photosynthetic ridges that run along the length of the leaf blade, like tiny walls standing up from the leaf surface. If you could shrink down and walk across a haircap moss leaf, these lamellae would look like parallel walls running from one end of the leaf to the other. They serve multiple functions. They increase the surface area available for photosynthesis, allowing the moss to capture more light and produce more energy. They create channels that help transport water up the leaf. They give the leaf structural support. It's an elegant adaptation, one that helps explain why haircap mosses can grow taller than most other mosses. The lamellae are visible with a good hand lens, appearing as parallel lines running down the leaf. Juniper haircap moss, Polytrichum juniperinum, tolerates drier, sandy soils than its common haircap cousin. Where Polytrichum commune needs consistently moist conditions, Polytrichum juniperinum can handle drought. You'll find it on sandy banks, on dry hillsides, in places where many mosses would struggle to survive. It's adapted to these harsher conditions through various features: leaves that can curl tightly when dry to reduce water loss, the ability to quickly resume photosynthesis when moisture returns, tolerance for higher light levels than many shade-loving mosses. The reddish leaf tips of juniper haircap moss help distinguish it from related species. When you're in the field trying to tell one Polytrichum species from another, check the leaf tips. If they have a reddish or rusty color, particularly when the moss is dry, you're probably looking at Polytrichum juniperinum. It's one of those field marks that experienced moss watchers learn to look for, a quick visual cue that can save you the trouble of more detailed examination. Many Polytrichum species regenerate quickly after disturbance. Burn a forest, clear a field, cut down vegetation, and often, Polytrichum mosses are among the first plants to return. Their spores travel on the wind, landing in disturbed areas where competition from other plants is reduced. The spores germinate, establishing new colonies. Within a few years, the disturbed site might be carpeted with young Polytrichum, creating a green covering that begins to stabilize the soil and moderate conditions for other plants that will follow. Polytrichum mosses are pioneers, adapted to colonize disturbed ground and begin the long process of succession that will eventually lead to a more complex plant community. Curly thatch moss, Dicranoasia serrata, forms dense tufts on bark and rock. The common name comes from the leaves, which curl when the moss dries out. This curling is a survival mechanism. When moisture is plentiful, the leaves spread out to maximize photosynthesis. But when conditions turn dry, the leaves curl inward, reducing the surface area exposed to the air. This minimizes water loss, helping the moss survive drought periods. It's a simple but effective strategy, one employed by many mosses that live in habitats where moisture availability fluctuates. Those curled leaves reduce water loss during dry periods, but the adaptation goes further than that. The curling also protects the delicate inner leaf surfaces from intense sunlight and from physical damage. It's a form of dormancy. The moss essentially shuts down, waiting out the unfavorable conditions. When rain returns, the leaves uncurl within minutes or hours, the moss absorbs water, and photosynthesis rhizomes. This ability to repeatedly dry out and revive allows curly thatch moss to survive in places that many plants cannot, places where drought is regular and prolonged. Curly thatch moss commonly appears on urban trees and rooftops, which tells you something about its tolerance for harsh conditions. Cities are challenging environments for mosses: air pollution, heat islands, fluctuating moisture, disturbance from human activity. But curly thatch moss persists. You'll find it on street trees, on old roof shingles, on walls and fences. It's one of those mosses that has successfully adapted to urban environments, finding niches in the midst of human development. Its presence is a small reminder that nature persists even in heavily modified landscapes, finding footholds wherever conditions allow. Racemitrium and related genera occupy exposed coastal and alpine rocks. These are among the toughest of mosses, growing in places where most plants cannot survive. On coastal headlands where salt spray constantly bathes the rocks, where wind blows nearly constantly, where desiccation alternates with soaking rain, Racemitrium mosses cling to bare rock and persist. In alpine areas above treeline, where the growing season is short and conditions are extreme, again, you'll find Racemitrium. These mosses form dark cushions or mats, often blackish or dark brown when dry, greening up when wet. They grow slowly, but they're remarkably resilient, adapted to endure conditions that would kill less hardy species. As sleep draws near, picture these open-ground mosses. The tall tufts of haircap moss, with their distinctive caps and photosynthetic lamellae. The drought-tolerant juniper haircaps surviving on sandy banks. The curly thatch moss on city rooftops, curling and uncurling with changing moisture. The dark cushions of Racemitrium clinging to windswept rocks. Each species tough in its own way, each adapted to survive where conditions are harsh. Let these images of resilience settle into your thoughts as you rest. Let's continue exploring the mosses of harsh, exposed environments, the ones that cling to rocks and survive conditions that seem impossibly difficult. The leaves of many rock mosses have hair-pointed tips, long, colorless extensions at the ends of the leaves that look like white hairs. These hair points serve an important function. They help trap moisture in environments where every drop of water matters. When fog rolls across a rock face, or when dew forms in the cool night, water condenses on these hair points. The droplets accumulate, growing larger until they're eventually absorbed by the moss leaf below. In deserts and semi-arid environments, in alpine areas where liquid water is scarce, these hair points can make the difference between survival and death. They're a beautiful adaptation, fine white bristles extending from green leaf tips, almost invisible individually but collectively creating a fuzzy appearance that helps these mosses capture water from the air itself. Bryum species form thin crusts on soil and stone, inconspicuous coverings that you might not even notice unless you're looking carefully. Yet Bryum mosses are everywhere. In gardens on bare soil between other plants, on mortar between bricks, on concrete sidewalks, on gravel paths. These thin green crusts are often Bryum of one species or another. There are many Bryum species, dozens worldwide, several in the Pacific Northwest. They're small, usually less than a centimeter tall, forming low mats rather than upright tufts. The taxonomy of Bryum is especially complex and often revised. Bryum species can be maddeningly difficult to tell apart. They look similar to the naked eye and often under a hand lens as well. Distinguishing between species typically requires microscopic examination of cell structure, capsule characteristics, and other minute details. And even then, experts disagree. New species are described regularly as botanists study populations more carefully. Old species names are sometimes combined when what were thought to be separate species turn out to be variants of the same species. The scientific names change, the classification gets rearranged, and field guide users struggle to keep up with the revisions. It's frustrating but also reflective of genuine scientific progress. Our understanding of these mosses is improving, even if that improvement comes with the cost of constantly updating our reference materials. Some rock mosses tolerate long desiccation, complete drying out for extended periods. We're not talking about a few days or even a few weeks. Some species can remain dried out for months, even years, and still revive when water returns. During the dry period, all metabolic activity stops. Photosynthesis ceases. Growth halts. The moss essentially enters a state of suspended animation. The cells remain viable, but they're not active. Then, when rain finally arrives, the moss absorbs water with remarkable speed. Within minutes, the dried brown or black crust begins to turn green. Within hours, photosynthesis resumes. The moss continues growing as if the dry period had been merely a brief interruption rather than a months-long ordeal. This ability, called desiccation tolerance, allows mosses to survive in environments that vascular plants cannot colonize: bare rock in arid climates, temporary pools that dry up seasonally, exposed surfaces where water availability is unpredictable. These drought-tolerant species colonize volcanic rock and road cuts, places where other plants struggle to gain a foothold. Newly exposed rock, whether from a volcanic eruption or from blasting for road construction, offers a blank slate. There's no soil, no organic matter, just bare mineral surface. But for mosses with desiccation tolerance and the ability to absorb nutrients directly from rain and dust, this rock represents opportunity. Spores arrive on the wind, land in tiny crevices or rough spots on the rock surface, germinate, and begin to grow. The process is slow. These pioneer mosses might take years to form visible colonies. But they're patient. They grow incrementally, surviving long dry periods, taking advantage of brief wet periods to photosynthesize and expand. Eventually, their presence begins to modify the rock surface. They trap dust and organic debris. They contribute to rock weathering through the acids they produce and the moisture they retain. They begin the long process of soil formation that will eventually allow other plants to colonize. Some mosses thrive in both alpine tundra and coastal dunes, two very different environments that nonetheless share certain characteristics. Both are exposed, subject to strong winds that can desiccate vegetation. Both experience extreme temperature fluctuations, hot days and cold nights, or in alpine areas, freezing nights even in summer. Both have substrates with limited water holding capacity, sand and dunes, rocky soil and tundra. Mosses that have adapted to one of these environments often have the traits needed to survive the other. They're tough, able to withstand physical stress from wind and temperature extremes. They're drought tolerant. They can photosynthesize quickly when conditions are favorable and shut down when conditions deteriorate. Finding this same species on a coastal dune and on an alpine peak thousands of feet higher might seem surprising at first, but it makes sense when you consider the underlying similarities in environmental challenges. The Pacific Northwest's rugged terrain creates many microhabitats, countless small-scale variations in conditions that allow different species to coexist. A north-facing slope might be cooler and moister than a south-facing slope just meters away. A rock crevice that channels water might stay damp while surrounding surfaces dry out. The base of a boulder might be sheltered from wind while the top is fully exposed. These small-scale differences create a mosaic of microhabitats, and different moss species respond to these differences by growing where conditions suit them best. Walk through a rocky area and pay attention to exactly where each moss species grows. You'll often notice patterns. One species in shaded crevices, another on exposed upper surfaces, a third where water seeps. The mosses are responding to subtle environmental gradients that we might not even notice without careful observation. Cliff faces and seeps support specialized moss communities, species adapted to the unique conditions these features create. Where water trickles down a cliff face, perhaps emerging from a spring or seep higher up, the rock stays perpetually wet. This constant moisture allows species that cannot tolerate drying to survive. You might find delicate, thin-leaved mosses here that would die in days if the water supply failed. They're specialists, adapted to these reliable wet spots and found almost nowhere else. These seep communities can be remarkably distinct from the surrounding vegetation, tiny oases of moisture-loving species in the midst of drier habitats. Some of these specialized mosses are underrepresented in field guides, simply because they're rare or grow in hard-to-reach places. Field guides tend to focus on common, widespread species, the ones most users are likely to encounter. The rare specialists might get a brief mention, or they might not appear at all. This doesn't mean they're unimportant. In many cases, these rare species play crucial roles in their specific habitats. But for field guide authors making difficult decisions about what to include in limited space, the common species take priority. The rare specialists remain somewhat mysterious, known primarily to expert botanists who make special efforts to study them. Certain Grimmia and Schistidium species require capsule features for identification. Grimmia and Schistidium are genera of small, dark rock mosses. Many species look virtually identical in vegetative form, similar-sized leaves, similar growth patterns, similar dark coloration when dry. To identify them with certainty, you need to examine the capsules, the spore-producing structures. What's the exact shape of the capsule? How is the lid attached? What does the peristome look like? Those tooth-like structures around the capsule opening. Is the capsule immersed in the leaves or held above them on a stalk? These microscopic details are the key to identification. The challenge is that mosses don't always produce capsules. You might find extensive colonies that are purely vegetative, giving you no way to identify them with certainty. Or capsules might be present but immature, not yet showing the features needed for identification. It's a reminder that moss identification requires patience and sometimes a bit of luck. As you settle into sleep, picture these rock mosses clinging to their harsh substrates. Hair-pointed leaves trapping fog moisture. Thin bryum crusts on bare soil. Drought-tolerant species reviving after months of desiccation. Pioneers colonizing bare volcanic rock. Specialized seed communities on cliff faces. Each species adapted to its particular niche, each surviving where it can, each contributing to the slow processes of soil formation and habitat creation. Let these images of resilience and adaptation drift through your mind as rest deepens. Let's explore how mosses connect across landscapes, how species found in one extreme environment might also appear in other, distant places that share similar challenges. Alpine moss forests overlap with those of the Rockies and Arctic. The high mountains of the Pacific Northwest, the Cascades, the Olympics, the various ranges of British Columbia, share many moss species with the Rocky Mountains to the east and with Arctic tundra to the north. This overlap makes sense when you consider that alpine environments, regardless of where they occur, present similar challenges. Short growing seasons due to cold temperatures and prolonged snow cover. Intense solar radiation at high elevations. Freezing temperatures possible any night of the year. Strong winds and rapid moisture fluctuations. Mosses that have adapted to these conditions in one mountain range can often survive in other mountain ranges, even if those ranges are separated by hundreds or thousands of miles of unsuitable low-elevation habitat. The species persist in these high-elevation islands, connected not by continuous distribution but by their shared adaptations to harsh alpine conditions. Coastal spray zone mosses tolerate salt exposure, which is another specialized adaptation worth considering. At the very edge of the ocean, in the zone where waves crash and spray flies, salt coats every surface. Most plants cannot survive this salt exposure. It desiccates their tissues, disrupts their cellular processes, makes life impossible. But certain mosses have adapted. They've developed tolerance mechanisms that allow them to survive regular salt exposure. Perhaps they can regulate the salt concentration in their cells. Perhaps they can shed salt-coated outer leaves. Perhaps they simply have cells tough enough to withstand occasional salt stress. Whatever the mechanisms, these coastal spray zone mosses occupy a niche that few other plants can tolerate. They create a band of green life right at the land-sea interface, surviving where conditions might seem impossibly harsh. Specific species combinations recur on basaltic rock throughout the Pacific Northwest. Basalt is volcanic rock, dark and fine-grained, formed from lava flows. It weathers in particular ways, releasing certain minerals as it breaks down. Its surface texture has certain characteristics, the way it fractures, the kinds of crevices and surfaces it creates. And mosses respond to these characteristics. Certain species prefer basalt. You'll see the same combinations appearing again and again on basalt outcrops, perhaps a Gremia species forming dark cushions, a Racemitrium species in crevices, a Schistidium species on exposed surfaces. Not exactly the same everywhere, but recurring patterns. It's not random. The rock chemistry and physical characteristics select for species adapted to those particular conditions. Mosses contribute to rock weathering by trapping moisture against rock surfaces. Weathering, the breakdown of rock into smaller particles and dissolved minerals, requires water. Physical weathering processes like freeze-thaw cycles need water that expands when it freezes, fracturing rock. Chemical weathering processes need water to dissolve minerals and carry them away. Biological weathering needs water for organisms to grow and produce acids that attack rock. Mosses help all these processes by holding moisture against rock surfaces. Where moss grows on rock, that rock stays damp longer after rain. The moisture penetrates tiny cracks and pores in the rock. Freeze-thaw cycles operate more effectively. Chemical reactions proceed. The rock weathers faster than it would if bare. The process is slow. Mosses aren't breaking down rock in days or weeks. But over years and decades and centuries, the cumulative effect is significant. Over time, moss debris helps build soil and crevices. As moss grows on rock, older parts of the moss die. This dead moss material doesn't immediately disappear. It accumulates, mixing with dust and weathered rock particles. In rock crevices where this debris collects, pockets of primitive soil begin to form. At first, it's barely soil, just a thin layer of organic matter and rock dust. But it's enough for the moss to grow a bit more vigorously. As more moss grows and dies, more organic matter accumulates. The pockets deepen. Eventually, there might be enough soil for other plants, perhaps a small fern or a herb with shallow roots, or even a tree seedling if the crevice is large enough and the soil deep enough. These soil-filled crevices can support entire miniature plant communities, all made possible by the slow accumulation of moss debris over long periods. Thin soil pockets and rock crevices host miniature plant communities, complete ecosystems in microcosm. Walk along a rocky cliff and look closely at the crevices. You might see moss, certainly. But look more carefully. Is there a small fern tucked into one crevice? A tiny flowering plant in another? Perhaps a small shrub with roots reaching deep into a wide crack? These plants are all growing in the soil that moss has helped create, surviving in these tiny pockets of substrate where moisture and nutrients are available. Each crevice community is isolated from others, separated by bare rock. Yet each follows similar patterns of colonization and succession, beginning with moss and potentially progressing to more complex communities if conditions allow. They're beautiful examples of how life finds a way to survive and thrive even in seemingly inhospitable environments. Connecting mountaintops across vast distances. Coastal spray zone mosses thriving where salt would kill most plants. Recurring species combinations on basalt outcrops. Mosses slowly weathering rock, trapping moisture, building soil. Tiny plant communities in rock crevices, made possible by accumulated moss debris. Each small ecosystem connected to larger patterns, each species adapted to its particular niche. Let these images of ecological connections settle into your thoughts. The world of mosses is interconnected, patterns repeating across landscapes, species persisting where conditions allow, communities forming wherever resources permit. Rest now, and let these patterns gently fade into dreams. Let's rise now from the ground, up into the trees, into the canopy where an entirely different world of mosses exists. The Pacific Northwest supports extensive epiphytic moss communities on conifers. Epiphytic means growing on other plants, using them as a substrate rather than growing in soil. These epiphytes aren't parasites. They don't take nutrients from the trees they grow on. Instead, they absorb nutrients from rain, from fog, from dust that settles on them. They use the tree merely as a platform, a place to be that's lifted above the ground into better light and air circulation. And in the Pacific Northwest, epiphytic mosses reach their fullest expression on conifer trees. Douglas fir, western red cedar, Sitka spruce, western hemlock. The combination of tree architecture, bark characteristics, and climate creates ideal conditions for epiphytic moss growth. These moss mats on tree trunks and branches can be several centimeters thick, not a thin coating, but substantial mats that you could sink your fingers into. Walk up to an old tree in a coastal Pacific Northwest forest and touch the trunk. Often, you're not touching bark directly, you're touching moss. Thick, soft moss that's been accumulating for years or decades. In the upper canopy, where researchers have climbed to study epiphytic communities, the moss mats can be even thicker, inches deep in some cases, creating hanging gardens that seem to defy gravity. These thick moss mats retain large amounts of water after rain. When it rains in the forest, the moss absorbs water like a sponge. After the rain stops, the moss continues to hold that water, releasing it slowly through evaporation. This creates local humidity in the canopy, moderating the microclimate. On dry summer days, when relative humidity would otherwise drop to uncomfortable levels for moisture-loving organisms, the evaporating water from epiphytic moss helps keep humidity higher. This benefits not just the moss itself but all the other organisms living in the canopy, lichens, ferns, invertebrates. Even the tree itself might benefit from the moderated conditions. Some forest mosses occur on both logs and lower trunks, showing versatility in their substrate preferences. These generalist species don't specialize in one particular growing surface. If a log offers good conditions, shade, moisture, appropriate bark texture, the moss will grow there. If a tree trunk lower down offers similar conditions, the moss will grow there too. Being a generalist has advantages. It means more potential habitat, more places where the species can establish itself. But it also means competition. The moss must be able to compete with specialists that are optimally adapted to specific substrates. Electrified cat's down moss, Rhytidiadelphus triquetris, forms bright green patches that stand out even in forests where green is the dominant color. This moss has a particularly vivid, fresh green color, brighter than most of its neighbors. When you see it in the forest, it almost seems to glow against darker backgrounds. The name electrified is apt. It does look like it's been charged with green energy. It's an attractive moss, one that catches the eye and makes identification relatively easy based on color alone. This moss thrives in moist, nutrient-rich forests, productive habitats where nutrient cycling is active and organic matter is abundant. These are forests on good soil, with plenty of rainfall, where decomposition proceeds steadily and nutrients are regularly released and recaptured by plants. In such forests, Rytidiadelphis triquetris can become quite abundant, forming extensive patches on the forest floor and on lower tree trunks. It's an indicator of forest health in a sense. Where this moss thrives, conditions are generally favorable for many other organisms as well. Some epiphytic mosses change form with height in the canopy, demonstrating phenotypic plasticity, the ability of a single species to alter its appearance in response to environmental conditions. Near the ground, where light levels are lower and humidity is higher, a moss might have one growth form, perhaps broader leaves to capture more light, or more compact growth to retain moisture. Higher up in the canopy, where light is more abundant but humidity is lower and wind is stronger, the same species might grow differently, perhaps smaller, thicker leaves to reduce water loss, or more upright growth to withstand wind. These aren't different species or different genetic variants. They're the same individuals responding to their local environment by adjusting their form. It's a sophisticated adaptation, allowing mosses to occupy a wider range of conditions than they could if they had only one fixed form. Fog allows mosses to absorb water directly from the air, and in the Pacific Northwest, this is a crucial adaptation. During summer, when rain might not fall for weeks at a time, coastal fog becomes the primary moisture source for many organisms. Fog forms over the cool ocean, drifts inland, encounters the warmer land, and condenses into tiny water droplets suspended in air. As this fog bank moves through a forest, the mosses intercept those droplets. The water condenses on moss surfaces and is immediately absorbed through the leaves. No roots, no soil water, no rainfall required, just direct absorption from fog. For epiphytic mosses that have no access to soil water, this fog absorption ability is essential for summer survival. Entire branches may be cloaked in moss, creating a visual effect that's almost surreal. In the wettest parts of coastal Pacific Northwest forests, you might see branches where the bark is completely invisible, every inch covered in thick moss. The branch itself becomes just a support structure for what amounts to a cylindrical mass of moss. These moss-cloaked branches look almost otherworldly, like something from a fantasy illustration. But they're real, and they're important. The moss isn't just decorative, it's functioning as habitat, as water storage, as nutrient capture, as a component of forest structure. This creates arboreal soil in the trees, not on the ground. As epiphytic moss grows and dies, organic matter accumulates on the branches. Moss debris mixes with bark fragments, with needles that fall from above, with dust that settles from the air. Over time, this mixture decomposes partially and forms a substrate that has soil-like properties. It's not the same as ground soil, it's lighter, more organic, less mineral. But it's enough to support other plants. Ferns root into this arboreal soil. Shrubs sometimes establish themselves. Small trees occasionally germinate in the thick moss mats of larger trees, creating trees growing on trees. This arboreal soil represents a significant portion of the forest's organic matter in old-growth Pacific Northwest forests. It's not just on the ground, much of it is up in the canopy, held in place by moss on branches. As sleep approaches, picture this three-dimensional world of epiphytic mosses. thick mats on trunks and branches, several centimeters deep. Water storage that moderates canopy humidity. Bright green electrified catsdale moss in productive forests. Mosses changing form from ground level to canopy top. Fog condensing on moss leaves and being absorbed directly. Branches completely cloaked in moss. Arboreal soil forming in the canopy, supporting aerial gardens. The forest isn't just happening on the ground, there's an entire ecosystem overhead, and mosses are fundamental to its structure and function. Rest now, and let these images of the layered forest drift through your mind. Let's continue our exploration of the canopy, discovering more about how these aerial moss communities function and what they support. Epiphytic moss mats host fungi and invertebrates, creating habitat for organisms that might not survive without them. Within the moss layers, fungi decompose dead moss and other organic matter, recycling nutrients. Tiny invertebrates, springtails, mites, pseudoscorpions, tiny beetles, graze on the fungi or on the moss itself, or hunt other invertebrates. Small spiders build webs to catch flying insects that land on the moss. Predatory mites patrol the moss surface looking for prey. It's a complete food web existing in the moss mat, far above the ground. Some of these invertebrates spend their entire lives in the canopy moss, never descending to the ground. For them, the moss is their entire world, providing shelter, moisture, food sources, and breeding sites. Different tree species support different moss assemblages, reflecting the subtle but important differences in bark characteristics. A Douglas fir, with its thick, deeply furrowed bark, provides different surfaces and microhabitats than a western red cedar, with its thin, stringy bark that sheds in long strips. A Sitka spruce has different bark pH and texture than a western hemlock. These differences matter to mosses. Some species prefer the deep furrows of Douglas fir bark, finding shelter and moisture there. Others prefer the smoother bark of other species. Some grow well on a variety of trees, while others are more specialized. Bark chemistry influences moss distribution in ways that aren't immediately obvious but become clear when you pay attention to patterns. Some tree barks are more acidic, others more neutral. Some release particular chemicals as they weather, tannins, resins, various secondary compounds. Mosses are sensitive to these chemical differences. A species that thrives on western red cedar, with its acidic, resin-rich bark, might struggle on red alder, with its more neutral bark and different chemical composition. The relationship between bark chemistry and moss distribution is complex, but it's real. Survey the mosses on different tree species in a mixed forest, and you'll see distinct patterns that reflect these chemical preferences. Red cedar and Douglas fir host different communities, even when growing side by side in the same forest. Stand between a red cedar and a Douglas fir, examine the moss on each, and you'll likely find different species or at least different relative abundances. Some mosses might appear on both, but others will be found predominantly or exclusively on one tree type or the other. The trees are dictating which mosses can grow through the physical and chemical characteristics of their bark. It's a beautiful example of how diversity begets diversity. Having multiple tree species in a forest creates more niche space for mosses, allowing more moss species to coexist than would be possible in a single species forest. Moss presence reflects local microclimate in ways that make mosses useful as indicators of environmental conditions. Where moss is abundant and diverse, you can infer that moisture levels are good, light levels are appropriate, air quality is reasonable, and disturbance is minimal. Where moss is sparse or absent, you can infer harsher conditions. Perhaps it's too dry, or too exposed, or air quality is poor. By reading the moss, you can read the environment. This is particularly useful in forests where microclimate varies over short distances. The north side of a valley might support lush moss communities, while the south side, receiving more direct sun and experiencing higher evaporation rates, might have much sparser moss cover. The moss tells the story of the microclimate more clearly than any weather station could. Urban mosses adapt to artificial structures in ways that show their resilience and flexibility. Concrete walls, roof tiles, metal railings, wooden fences, these aren't natural substrates, but some mosses colonize them successfully. The moss doesn't care that the surface is human-made. If it provides appropriate texture for attachment, if moisture is available sometimes, if air quality is tolerable, moss can grow. The species that succeed in cities tend to be the tougher, more pollution-tolerant, more drought-tolerant species. Delicate species that need constant moisture and clean air won't survive in cities. But the generalists, the hardy ones, persist. Their presence in urban areas is a reminder that nature doesn't give up easily, that life finds ways to survive even in heavily modified environments. Air pollution affects sensitive species more than tolerant ones, creating gradients of moss diversity that correlate with air quality. In pristine rural areas far from pollution sources, you might find dozens of moss species on a single tree, including many sensitive species. Move closer to cities or industrial areas, and diversity drops. The most sensitive species disappear first. As pollution intensifies, more species drop out, until only the most tolerant remain. In the most polluted areas, you might find only one or two very hardy species, or no mosses at all. This gradient has been documented around many cities. It's being used as a biomonitoring tool, survey moss diversity along transects from rural to urban areas, and you can map air quality based on moss presence and abundance. Old-growth forests hold immense canopy moss biomass that represents decades or centuries of accumulation. In young forests, canopy moss biomass is relatively low. Trees are small, their branches thin, their bark relatively smooth and young. There hasn't been time for thick moss mats to develop. But in old-growth forests, where trees might be hundreds of years old and branches might be as thick as young trees elsewhere, moss biomass reaches extraordinary levels. Researchers who have weighed epiphytic moss in old-growth forests have found numbers that surprise even experts. Tons of moss per hectare, all held up in a canopy. This moss represents a significant carbon store, a massive reservoir of water, a huge amount of surface area for nutrient capture and habitat provision. When old-growth forests are logged, all this canopy moss biomass is lost. It takes centuries to rebuild. This moss biomass transfers nutrients to the forest floor through a process called canopy drip and litter fall. When rain falls through the canopy, it picks up nutrients from the moss and carries them to the ground. Dissolved nutrients in the water dripping from moss-laden branches, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, other minerals. Additionally, pieces of moss break off, from wind, from falling branches, from gradual detachment. This moss litter fall drifts down to the forest floor, where it decomposes and releases nutrients. The canopy moss is functioning as a nutrient pump, capturing nutrients from fog and rain and dust, holding them temporarily in the canopy, then slowly releasing them to the soil below. It's a form of nutrient cycling that doesn't happen in forests without extensive epiphytic moss communities. Some epiphytic mosses show disjunct distributions, with eastern North America, found in the Pacific Northwest and in the Appalachian Mountains, but nowhere in between. These disjunct patterns are puzzling at first. Why would the same species occur on both coasts but not in the middle of the continent? The answer lies in historical biogeography. During past ice ages, when glaciers covered much of northern North America and climates were different, forest distributions were different. Mosses that are now disjunct were once continuously distributed across the continent. As climates changed and forests shifted, populations became isolated. The eastern and western populations have been separated for thousands of years now, yet they remain the same species, connected by their shared ancestry even though they're separated by geography. Others reflect ancient links to East Asia, species found in the Pacific Northwest and in Japan, China, or Korea, but nowhere else. These distributions suggest past connections across what is now the Bering Strait. When sea levels were lower during ice ages, a land bridge connected Asia and North America. Forests extended across this bridge, and mosses migrated with them. When sea levels rose again, drowning the land bridge, populations became isolated. But the genetic legacy remains. Pacific Northwest mosses and Asian mosses that look identical might in fact be the same species, separated by ocean but connected by ancient migration routes. Moss communities shift with elevation as you climb mountains, reflecting the gradient of temperature and moisture that comes with increasing altitude. At low elevations, you might find one set of species adapted to relatively warm, moist conditions. Climb higher, and temperature drops. Different species appear, ones adapted to cooler conditions. Keep climbing into the subalpine zone, and the assemblage changes again. Eventually, you reach treeline, where only the hardiest species persist. These elevational gradients of moss communities mirror similar patterns in vascular plants, all driven by the same fundamental environmental gradients. Only the toughest species persist in windy canopy tops, where conditions approach those of alpine tundra despite the forest location. At the very top of the tallest trees, where branches are thin and swaying, where wind is nearly constant, where desiccation is severe, most mosses cannot survive. The species that do make it to these extreme heights are tough specialists, adapted to withstand wind and drying. They might be the same species that grow in alpine areas or on coastal rocks, habitat generalists that can survive anywhere harsh conditions prevail, regardless of whether those conditions are in a mountain top, a canopy top, or a wave-battered coast. As you settle into deep rest, picture this complex canopy world. Moss mats hosting food webs of fungi and invertebrates. Different tree species supporting different moss assemblages. Bark chemistry dictating which species can grow where. Urban mosses adapting to artificial structures. Old-growth forests holding centuries of accumulated moss biomass. Nutrients cycling from canopy to floor through drip and litter fall. distributions reflecting ancient connections across continents and oceans. Elevational gradients of changing species composition. And at the very top, the toughest species clinging to swaying branches in nearly tree-lean conditions. Let these images of ecological complexity drift through your thoughts as sleep deepens. And now we come to wetlands, to bogs and fens and stream margins, where water is abundant and specialized mosses create unique ecosystems. Sphagnum mosses build peat in bogs and fens through a process that has been ongoing for thousands of years. Sphagnum grows from the top, adding new growth each year while the older growth below dies but doesn't fully decompose. The waterlogged, acidic conditions of bogs prevent complete decomposition. So the dead moss accumulates. Year after year, layer upon layer, building up slowly but steadily. Over centuries and millennia, this accumulation creates peat deposits that can be several meters thick. These peatlands store enormous amounts of carbon that was captured from the atmosphere through photosynthesis and then locked away in partially decomposed plant material. Northern peatlands worldwide represent one of the planet's largest carbon stores, and sphagnum mosses are the primary architects of these carbon banks. Sphagnum mosses acidify their surroundings in a process that helps them maintain their dominance. They release hydrogen ions into the water, lowering pH and making conditions more acidic. This acidification inhibits the growth of many competing plants that can't tolerate low pH. It slows decomposition, which helps peat accumulate rather than breaking down completely. Essentially, sphagnum creates conditions that favor its own growth while making life difficult for competitors. It's a powerful strategy, one that has allowed sphagnum to dominate peatlands across the northern hemisphere for millions of years. Different sphagnum species occupy hummocks and hollows in bog surfaces, partitioning the habitat in subtle but important ways. In a bog, the surface isn't flat. There are raised areas called hummocks that stand above the average water level, and depressed areas called hollows where water pools. Different sphagnum species prefer different positions. Some species grow best on hummocks, where they experience occasional drying. Others prefer hollows, where they're constantly submerged or nearly so. This microhabitat partitioning allows multiple sphagnum species to coexist in the same bog, each occupying its preferred position in the hummock-hollow microtopography. The leaves of sphagnum contain hyaline cells, large, dead, empty cells that fill with water. If you could look at a cross-section of a sphagnum leaf under a microscope, you'd see a network of small, green, living cells for photosynthesis, surrounded and supported by much larger, colorless, dead cells with holes in their walls. These hyaline cells function like tiny water tanks. They fill with water when moisture is available, allowing the moss to hold water equivalent to many times its dry weight. This extreme water storage capacity is why sphagnum feels so spongy when you squeeze it. It's literally full of water, held in these specialized cells. The adaptation allows sphagnum to maintain moisture even when bog water levels drop temporarily, and it contributes to the overall water-holding capacity of peatlands. Peat carpets support carnivorous plants in a relationship that makes ecological sense when you consider nutrient limitation. Bog environments are extremely nutrient poor, especially for nitrogen. The peat provides almost no available nitrogen because it's so acidic and decomposition is so slow. Most plants struggle in these conditions. But carnivorous plants have evolved an alternative strategy. They supplement their nutrient supply by catching and digesting insects. Sundews with their sticky leaves. Pitcher plants with their trapping chambers. These plants root in the sphagnum peat, anchoring themselves in the moss, but they get essential nutrients from insects rather than from the substrate. The sphagnum provides the physical support and the moisture, while the carnivorous plants solve the nutrient problem in their own way. Non-sphagnum wetland mosses stabilize sediments in marshes and along streams where sphagnum doesn't dominate. In mineral-rich wetlands where pH is higher, other mosses take over. These mosses might not build peat, but they serve crucial functions. Their dense growth binds particles together, stabilizing stream banks and marsh edges against erosion. Water flowing through moss slows down, which allows sediment to settle out and helps maintain water clarity. The moss creates a stable substrate where other wetland plants can root. Without these mosses, many wetlands would be more unstable, more prone to erosion, less able to support diverse plant communities. Mosses slow water flow through their physical structure, creating roughness that increases friction and reduces velocity. Water moving through a moss mat encounters resistance with every stem, every leaf. This resistance slows the water down. In streams with moss-covered beds, water velocity is lower than in streams without moss. This slowing has beneficial effects. It reduces erosion of the stream bed. It creates more diverse flow patterns with areas of slow and fast water. It allows sediment time to settle out, improving water quality. It creates better habitat for aquatic invertebrates that might be washed away in faster currents. Riparian mosses, mosses growing along stream and river margins, trap organic matter that falls into the water or washes down from upstream. Leaves, needles, twigs, insect bodies, all this organic debris gets caught in moss. Instead of washing downstream and being lost from the local system, it's retained. The trapped material begins to decompose, releasing nutrients that can be used by the moss itself and by other organisms in the riparian zone. The moss functions as a nutrient trap, holding resources in place where they benefit the local ecosystem rather than being exported downstream. These riparian mosses provide habitat for invertebrates in the vulnerable zone where land meets water. Aquatic insects in their larval stages often live in moss at stream margins. Terrestrial invertebrates find shelter in streamside moss when they need moist refuges. The moss creates structural complexity, turning a simple water-rock interface into a diverse habitat with many micro-niches. Biodiversity increases. More invertebrates mean more food for fish, amphibians, and other predators. The presence of moss enhances the productivity and diversity of the entire riparian ecosystem. Moss carpets reduce erosion on slopes and along watercourses. A slope covered with moss sheds less soil during rainstorms than a bare slope. The moss absorbs raindrop impact, preventing the kinetic energy of falling rain from dislodging soil particles. The moss slows water flow across the surface, reducing the erosive power of runoff. The moss roots and rhizoids bind soil particles together, creating a more stable matrix. All these effects combine to protect soil from erosion. In vulnerable areas like steep slopes or stream banks, moss can be the difference between stability and erosion failure. These moss carpets buffer soil temperature and moisture, creating more stable conditions for soil organisms and plant roots. Under a moss carpet, the soil doesn't heat up as much during sunny days. It doesn't cool down as much during cold nights. The temperature regime is more moderate, with less extreme fluctuation. Moisture is more consistent too. The moss holds water like a sponge, releasing it slowly into the soil below. During dry periods, this stored water keeps the soil beneath the moss damp even when surrounding bare soil has dried completely. These buffering effects create better conditions for decomposer organisms, for mycorrhizal fungi, for plant roots. The soil under moss is a more stable, more biologically active environment. Pioneer mosses initiate soil formation on bare rock or disturbed ground. After disturbance, whether from fire, landslide, glacial retreat, volcanic eruption, mosses are often among the first colonizers. They don't need soil. They can grow on bare rock or mineral substrate. And as they grow, they begin the process of soil formation. They trap dust and organic debris. They produce organic acids that help weather rock. They contribute their own dead material as organic matter. Over time, a thin layer of primitive soil develops. This soil allows other plants to establish. The mosses have initiated a process of succession that will eventually lead to more complex plant communities and richer soils. Moss litter decomposes slowly compared to the litter from most vascular plants. A fallen leaf might decompose in months to a few years. Dead moss might persist for many years, releasing its nutrients slowly. This slow decomposition rate has consequences for nutrient cycling and carbon storage. In forests with abundant moss, the forest floor often has a thick organic layer composed partly of slowly decomposing moss. This layer holds nutrients, stores carbon, maintains moisture. The slow decomposition means nutrients are released gradually rather than in pulses, providing steady nutrient availability to plants. Some mosses associate with nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria, forming partnerships that help them thrive in nitrogen-poor environments. Cyanobacteria are bacteria capable of fixing atmospheric nitrogen, converting N2 gas from the air into ammonia that can be used by living organisms. Some cyanobacteria live inside moss tissues or closely associated with moss colonies. The moss provides shelter and moisture for the cyanobacteria. The cyanobacteria provide nitrogen compounds that the moss can use for growth. It's a mutualistic relationship similar to the relationship between legume plants and nitrogen-fixing bacteria in root nodules, but expressed in a completely different group of organisms. This partnership allows these mosses to colonize nitrogen-poor substrates where other mosses might struggle. Mosses absorb nutrients directly from rain and dust, bypassing the soil root pathway that vascular plants depend on. They have no roots in the true sense. They attach to substrates with rhizoids, but these don't absorb nutrients the way roots do. Instead, mosses absorb nutrients through their leaves, directly from water and particles that land on them. Rainwater contains dissolved nutrients that were in the atmosphere or washed from tree canopies. Dust contains mineral nutrients. The moss captures these inputs and uses them for growth. This strategy works well for epiphytic mosses that have no access to soil, but it also works for ground-dwelling mosses. They can supplement soil nutrients with inputs from rain and dust, giving them more total resource availability. And even today, the complete moss list of the Pacific Northwest remains a moving target. New species are still being discovered. Taxonomic revisions are still being made. What was thought to be one species is sometimes split into multiple species. What were thought to be distinct species are sometimes lumped together. Our understanding continues to evolve. Citizen scientists contribute observations. Professional botanists conduct field surveys. Molecular studies reveal hidden diversity. The work continues. The exploration is ongoing. There's always more to learn in the quiet world of mosses. As you drift into final deep sleep, let all these images settle into rest. Sphagnum building peat over millennia, creating vast carbon stores. Different species on hummocks and hollows, carnivorous plants rooted in nutrient-poor peat. Riparian mosses stabilizing stream banks and trapping nutrients. Pioneer mosses initiating soil formation on bare rock. Slow decomposition storing carbon. Cyanobacterial partnerships fixing nitrogen. Direct nutrient absorption from rain and dust. And the ongoing work of discovery, still revealing new species and new understanding. The mosses continue their patient work, growing slowly, surviving where they can, playing crucial roles in ecosystems from bogs to forests to alpine peaks. They've been doing this for hundreds of millions of years, since long before humans existed, and they'll likely continue long after we're gone. Quiet, persistent, essential. Rest now, and let the mosses rest in your dreams.